Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Anthropology for Dummies, 2nd edition, by Cameron M. Smith, Ph.D. Narrated by Christopher Douyard. Limit of liability / disclaimer of warranty. While the publisher and author have used their best efforts in preparing this book, they make no representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy or completeness of the contents of this book, and specifically disclaim any implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. No warranty may be created or extended by sales representatives or written sales materials. The advice and strategies contained herein may not be suitable for your situation. You should consult with a professional where appropriate. Neither the publisher nor the author shall be liable for damages arising herefrom. Introduction. Right now, someone, somewhere, is excavating an ancient relic, perhaps a stone tool 1,000,000 years old, or the remains of an ancient Greek wine jug. That one artifact may not be much, but it's a piece in the vast jigsaw puzzle of humanity's ancient past. Right now, someone somewhere is interviewing a hunter-gatherer, maybe in the Arctic or in Africa. That one interview, maybe about why the hunter-gatherer is going to split away from the main group with his family, may not be much, but it's a page in the encyclopedia of human cultural behavior. Right now, someone somewhere is decoding ancient Neanderthal DNA, trying to identify how living humans are related to this fascinating proto-human species. The fragment of DNA is microscopic, but it can tell humanity a tremendous amount about our biology and evolution. And right now, someone somewhere is studying a rapidly vanishing language, maybe in Polynesia or Southeast Asia, by learning it from a tribal group's elders. The words and phrases she's learning are short, but each language provides a new way to understand the world in a uniquely human way. All of those someones are anthropologists like me, people who professionally study the human species in all its aspects, from biology to culture. Of course, it's not just anthropologists who love to learn about humanity. People from every culture and walk of life have an interest in what humanity is today and what it's been in the past. And that's why I've written Anthropology for Dummies, to share what remarkable things anthropologists have discovered and continue to discover with folks like you who are fascinated with the human species, or at least fascinated with passing your Intro to Anthropology class. Join me for a grand tour of the human species, across the world and through millions of years. If that doesn't get your blood going, I can't help you. About this book. The study of humanity today, and for the past few million years, has created a vast storehouse of anthropological knowledge printed in millions of pages of research reports and thousands of books. Even professional anthropologists simply can't keep up with the speed and volume of published research. I can't possibly recount what all this research has revealed, but I can, and in this book I do, boil down 150 years of anthropological discoveries into a nuts and bolts reference describing the essentials of human evolution, both cultural and biological. I also describe just how anthropologists work, so you can understand the pros and cons of different methods. If you're taking an introductory course in anthropology, this book can help clarify some ideas that can be pretty confusing and aren't often clearly explained, even in textbooks. If you're reading this book out of sheer curiosity, let me assure you that I've trimmed away a lot of the technical material that may otherwise get in the way of your understanding the essential lessons of anthropology. Lots of popular science books cover some aspects of anthropology, but few, if any, really cover anthropology as a whole in a clear, no-nonsense way. I've worked hard to provide just such a handbook in Anthropology for Dummies. Each chapter is divided into concise sections, and each section breaks down the essentials of anthropology, including terms and definitions, the lowdown about competing theories, how anthropology understood certain topics in the past, and how it understands them today. I've written this book so that you can start anywhere. If you're most interested in human language, you can jump to that chapter and understand it without knowing about human evolution. But because every aspect of humanity is tied to some other aspect, I'd be surprised if you don't eventually end up reading it all. Finally, you should be aware of a few conventions I follow throughout the text. It's tough to write a book about humanity without using the collective term we. So when I use it, keep in mind that I'm talking about humanity at large, and not anthropologists, unless otherwise noted. I often refer to the past because humanity is an old species, and we can learn a lot from our past. When I do this, I often use the convention BP for before present, which basically means many years ago. When talking about the history of Western civilization, I use the conventional terms BC for before Christ, and AD for Anno Domini, which marks the year of Christ's birth. Some people instead use BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era, to avoid valuing the timescale of Western civilization. But these terms still just point exactly to BC and AD. Because so much information about the past uses BC and AD, I stick with this convention. Don't worry, I'm not pushing a religion or valuing one timescale over another. I'm just using a common way to indicate the passage of time. The term hominin refers to any of the many species of large, bipedal, walking on two legs, primates. This includes modern humans and all our ancestors and relatives back to the time of our split from the lineage that led to modern chimpanzees. Some earlier texts use the term hominid, but that term is largely replaced today with hominin, and I follow that convention in this book. Anthropologists often use the terms society and culture interchangeably. I do this as well. It's an old convention that's not technically accurate, but unless you're studying for your PhD, the difference isn't that important. Don't worry, I define both society and culture in the book, so you're aware of the difference. When I refer to the scientific names of various life forms, I capitalize the genus, but don't capitalize the species or subspecies. For example, modern humans are all Homo sapiens sapiens. I don't always use subspecies names, like the second sapiens, and sometimes, for convenience, I just indicate the genus with a capital letter while writing out the species name, as in H. sapiens. Don't worry, this kind of terminology isn't a large or important point of this book, and these designations will all be very clear when you come upon them. Within this book, you may note that some web addresses break across two lines of text. If you're simply reading this book in print and you want to visit one of these web pages, simply key in the web address exactly as it's noted in the text, pretending as though the line break doesn't exist. If you're reading this as an ebook, you've got it easy. Just click the web address to be taken directly to the web page. Foolish assumptions. I don't think I'm going too far out on a flimsy limb to make these assumptions about you as a reader. You're someone, just about anyone who can read really, interested in the human species. Bring that interest to the reading, and you'll be rewarded. You're taking an Introduction to Anthropology course, and your textbook just isn't making things clear. All you want is a friendly, digestible resource that gives you the info you need in plain English. You either believe that evolution happens, or that it's a sound biological theory. Evolution is the basis of modern biology, and nothing in the world of living things makes sense without it. Even if you have some doubts about evolution, I'm assuming that you can keep your mind open to the fact that humanity is very ancient. Evolution is a foundation of the scientific study of our species. You're anyone who wants a handy reference to settle a friendly argument about some aspect of humanity. When did the first civilizations arise? How many human languages exist? What did our earliest ancestors eat? You'll find these answers and plenty more. Icons used in this book. To make this book easier to read and simpler to use, I include some icons that can help you find and fathom key ideas and information. Remember, anytime you see this icon, you know the information that follows is so important that it's worth reading more than once. Technical stuff. This icon presents historical, case-specific, or otherwise interesting information that you can read for further understanding. However, the info isn't necessary for grasping the concept. Warning. This icon warns about potential traps that can derail you in your quest to understand anthropology. Beyond the book. In addition to the material in the print or ebook you're reading right now, this product also comes with a free cheat sheet for information on how anthropologists group the early hominins, linguistic anthropology, and more. To access the cheat sheet, go to dummies.com and type Anthropology for Dummies cheat sheet in the search box. Where to go from here? I've organized this book so that you can go wherever you want to find complete information. Want to know about the evolution of civilization, for example? Check out Chapter 10. If you're interested in Neanderthals and why they became extinct, you want Chapter 7. If the complexities of language or religion flip your switch, head for Chapter 13 or 16. You get the idea. If you're not sure where you want to go, you may want to start with Part 1. It gets you started with what anthropology studies and how, and you can follow your interests from there. 1. What is anthropology? In this part, get an overview of anthropology. Understand the history of anthropology. See how anthropology is studied today. Chapter 1. Human Beings and Being Human. An overview of anthropology. In this chapter, discovering what anthropology is and how it studies the human species. Exploring the Indiana Jones stuff, physical anthropology, and archaeology. Checking out how cultures and languages fit into anthropology. Finding out how modern anthropology analyzes human issues today. Why isn't everyone the same? Why do people worldwide have differences in skin and hair color and ways of greeting one another? Why doesn't everyone speak the same language? Is there such a thing as human nature? Questions like these have fascinated humanity for as long as we have written records, and I'm sure people thousands and even tens of thousands of years before writing asked the same questions in whatever language they used. Why don't those people do things the way I do? What's wrong with them anyway? Of course, people from that other group just on the next hilltop were scratching their heads and asking the same questions. Enter anthropology, the scientific study of humanity. In this book, I tell you what you need to know about anthropology, what anthropologists have discovered about humanity, and what anthropologists mean when they say there are many ways of being human. I will also tell you how anthropology works and what anthropologists have learned about humanity, both modern and ancient. You'll see that in a century or so of study, anthropology has helped to answer some of humanity's fundamental questions about itself. And knowing ourselves is important if, as a species, we want to make good decisions about our present and future. Biologically, humanity needs to know itself if it's going to make good decisions about everything from gene therapy to genetically engineered food crops. That knowledge comes from anthropology. And culturally, knowledge of our past helps us understand what we are today, for better and worse. We did not just pop up out of nowhere. We have a long and complex evolutionary history that can help us understand what we are at the moment. In Part 1 of this book, specifically in Chapters 2 and 3, you find out how anthropology studies humanity from these biological and cultural perspectives. In Part 4 of this book, you see how anthropology helps humanity to deal with some real-world problems. Digging into anthropology's history. For a long time, the answers to profound questions about humanity came largely from religious texts. For example, when European explorers realized that the New World wasn't India, the Native Americans, millions of people nobody was expecting to find, were explained from a biblical perspective as remnants of the lost tribes of Israel. But since the late 19th century AD, another perspective has emerged, the scientific study of humanity called anthropology. At first, anthropology was a quaint and pretty simple affair, studied as a hobby by all kinds of naturalists and pseudoscientists. But when people started to realize how much anthropology could teach humanity about itself, they began to take it more seriously. Anthropology became a science, the science of humanity at large. In Chapter 2, you can explore anthropology's history and how it changed over time from being a pseudoscience to today's highly technical study of human DNA, ancient fossils, the evolution of the mind, and how cultures change through time. In Chapter 3, you can find more detail about how anthropology has developed over time, affecting how it goes about learning about humanity in the first place. Remember, the questions that anthropologists have asked, and ask today, are in part a reflection of the times. For example, today a lot of people are investigating the effects of climate change on ancient human populations. This isn't to say that climate change isn't an issue today, but we should be careful with projecting our anxieties on the past. Knowing the potential for bias, anthropologists are careful about making assumptions. My mentor, Professor Ken Ames, taught me a great lesson early in my grad school career. Be most skeptical of your favorite hypothesis. I try to remember that advice anytime I think I have something figured out. Getting acquainted with anthropology's subfields. Anthropology has a complex, colorful, and sometimes checkered history. As you find out in Chapter 2, the field has gone through several transformations, and today there are more ways of doing anthropology than you can shake a stick at. Now, the study of humanity is a vast undertaking, so anthropologists have divvied up the task into four main subfields. Physical anthropology, humanity as a biological species. Archaeology, humanity's deep past. Cultural anthropology, humanity's current behavioral diversity. Linguistics, humanity's unique mode of communication. As you study anthropology, keep in mind that to really understand humanity, anthropologists need to know at least a little about each of the subfields. For example, an archaeologist studying an ancient civilization needs to know what a physical anthropologist has to say about people's bones, because the bones can tell us what people ate or how they practiced medicine. And today, cultural anthropologists can't know much about a culture unless they have a good knowledge of that culture's language, requiring some familiarity with linguistic anthropology. Physical anthropology. Physical differences between groups of humans are easily visible. Mainland Europeans tend to be lighter-skinned with straight hair, and folks from Africa are typically darker-skinned with curlier hair. These are biological differences, and the goal of physical anthropology, sometimes known as biological anthropology, the study of humanity as a biological species, is to understand how and why these variations on the human theme came about. Physical differences among living humans aren't all that physical anthropology is concerned with, but understanding human variation, especially genetic differences worldwide and through time, is an important part of the field. In Part 2 of this book, I boiled down the main discoveries of physical anthropology to date so that what's left is the skeleton, the essentials. This material is what physical anthropologists know today and a little about what they're studying and hope to learn in the future. Chapter 4 introduces you to the primate order, your home in the animal kingdom. Chapters 6 and 7 take you to Africa, the cradle of humanity, to cover the fossil and some DNA evidence of human evolution. Like all anthropology, physical anthropology has its fingers in a lot of different pies, from the study of fossils to DNA analysis, documenting and explaining differences in cold or heat tolerance among people worldwide, the study of disease, population genetics, and a dozen other topics. Chapter 19 introduces you to the cutting-edge study of physical anthropology, focusing on the magnificent molecule called DNA. Archaeology. It's hard to get to know someone without knowing a little about their past, and the same goes for humanity. A lot of what we do today, good and bad, is based on the acts and decisions of our ancestors. To understand humanity any further than skin deep requires looking into the past. This is the business of archaeologists. But the past can be foggy, on a good day, because history, the written record, can only take us so far. And if you believe everything written in the ancient historical texts, well, I've got some oceanfront property in Utah you may be interested in. However well-meaning they may have been, historians have had their biases like everyone else. And of course, the ancient historians didn't write down everything, especially if they were unaware of, say, the entire Western Hemisphere, North and South America, also sometimes known as the New World. Archaeologists are the people who try to fill in the gaps of history by studying the material remains of ancient cultures. It's archaeologists who get excited over discovering an ancient piece of pottery, not necessarily for that piece of pottery alone, though it may be beautiful, but because of what it can tell humanity about our past. Remember, archaeologists don't just focus on correcting or fleshing out the historical record. They also study the roughly 2.5 million years of humanity before writing was invented, which was only about 6,000 years ago. Chapter 5 tells you how archaeologists learn about the past, from carbon dating to meticulous excavation. Chapter 7 tells you about the spread of modern humans out of Africa and across the globe. And Chapter 8 gives some exciting examples of how humanity adapted to every environment imaginable, including the Arctic and the Pacific. Cultural anthropology. Humanity has more facets than just where we came from, our relations to the other primates, or how our ancient civilizations rose or fell. You also have to consider the whole original question of why people today differ worldwide. How come traditional Polynesian clothing is different from traditional clothing in the Sahara? Why do so many Asian people eat with chopsticks, but others use a fork and knife? Why is it okay for a man to have several wives in one culture, but not in another culture? Unfortunately, the common sense answers are rarely right. Chopsticks aren't some archaic precursor to a fork and knife. They're just a different way of getting food into the mouth. Similarly, the ways in which people find marriage partners in traditional Indian society, perhaps by arranged marriages, and traditional German society are different because of the history of the culture in these regions, not because one is an advancement on the other. Cultural anthropologists study why these variations exist in the first place, and how they're maintained as parts of cultural traditions, as elements of a given society's collective identity, its culture. Part 3 of this book covers this field of cultural anthropology, the study of living human cultures and the great diversity in how people behave. Overall, these chapters give you the nuts and bolts of what cultural anthropologists have learned about living human cultures. Chapter 11 tells you just what culture for anthropologists really means. No, it's not the opera or stuffy wine and cheese parties, and how critical it is for human survival. In Chapter 12, you see that all human cultures are basically ethnocentric, meaning that they typically believe that their own way of doing things, from how they eat to how they dress, is proper, right, and superior to any other way of doing things. This feeling of superiority can lead, and has led, to everything from poor intercultural relations to ethnic cleansing. Cultural anthropologists, and the knowledge and understanding they generate while studying the many different ways of being human, can help smooth out intercultural communications. How they do this is also covered in Chapter 12. It can help humans understand other perspectives. Part 3 also explains why race and ethnicity can be such volatile issues. Chapter 14. How humanity organizes identity, from family groupings to gender categories, and keeps track of who's related to whom. Chapter 15. And the basic characteristics of humanity's various religious traditions and political systems. Chapter 16. Linguistics. Depending on whom you ask, humanity as a whole speaks something like 6,000 human languages, though most people on Earth speak only one of about 5 languages. Chapter 13 explains what language is and how linguistic anthropologists investigate how language evolved in the first place, one of the most fascinating questions in all of anthropology. In laying out a clear definition of language, linguistic anthropologists have had to compare human communication with the communication systems of other living things. All of what they've learned, from the fascinating study of how humans acquire language to the layers of meaning that seem to only be present in human communication, give humanity a better understanding of just how unique and precious language is. That uniqueness is in jeopardy, though, because languages become extinct every year as more people take up just speaking one of the handful of main languages spoken worldwide today. Making sense of anthropology's methods. Anthropology's methods range from lab analysis of DNA to taking notes on Sicilian or any culture's body language. Each of these methods helps better understand the many ways of being human. The following list gives you an overview of some of these methods. Evolution is the foundation of modern biology, and physical anthropologists who study humanity from a biological perspective rely on it. Check out Chapter 3 for the lowdown on exactly what evolution is and isn't, and how it helps anthropologists study humanity. Archaeology isn't just Indiana Jones dodging bad guys and saving priceless treasures. Chapter 5 covers the methods of archaeologists, from keeping track of where objects are found to dating them by the carbon-14 method. Do cultural anthropologists really get grants to go to other countries and observe human behavior? Yes, but there's a lot more to it than that. Chapter 12 covers the methods of cultural anthropology, from observation to immersion in a subject culture. The complexity of human language is one of the main characteristics distinguishing us from non-human animals. Chapter 13 shows you how anthropologists think about and study language. Applied Anthropology, Using the Science in Everyday Life. Part 4 of this book introduces the many ways that the lessons of anthropology are relevant in daily life. Anthropology isn't just studied by scruffy professors clothed in tweeds, although I have to admit that yes, I do have a tweed jacket. Anthropologists are employed by many companies and government agencies, bringing what they know of humanity to the tables of commerce, international diplomacy, and other fields as applied anthropologists. Applied anthropologists help humanity get along in a very literal sense. Chapter 17 shows how the lessons of anthropology are important to understanding and preventing cultural conflict. Anthropology also helps humanity survive. Humanity faces enormous challenges, from overpopulation to language extinction and climate change, covered in Chapter 18, and common-sense solutions to these problems aren't too effective, sometimes because what we think of as common sense may not apply in a culture other than our own. But with a subtler understanding of why humanity is the way it is, applied anthropologists are better suited to implementing changes, particularly on the community level, than many government officials who may know a lot about high-level politics, but little about cultural traditions and values in the smaller communities they govern. Chapter 19 takes you into the lab, where anthropologists are analyzing DNA with methods that can help you find out where your genetic roots lie. This chapter shows you that they ultimately lie in the great continent of Africa. Finally, Chapter 20 has some exciting examples of how archaeological discoveries help us flesh out the history books. The common people of the ancient world, unless you're royalty, that means your ancestors, didn't write much, but archaeology has given them a voice. Here you can find out about the lives of common laborers of ancient Egypt, American slaves, and the vanished Greenlandic Norse. Chapter 2. Looking into Humanity's Mirror, Anthropology's History. In this chapter, figuring out exactly what anthropology studies, discovering how anthropology defines humanity and culture, reviewing the historical roots that led to modern anthropology. In 1949, anthropologist Clyde Kluckhohn published Mirror for Man, an introduction to the study of anthropology, the study of humanity, anthro meaning of humanity, logi meaning the study of. Since then, attitudes have changed a little. Most people now speak of humanity rather than mankind. But Kluckhohn's words still ring true. Anthropology holds up a great mirror to man and lets him look at himself in his infinite variety. Anthropology is the mirror of our species, a place for humanity to reflect on itself. But you have to do that looking, and the discovering that comes with it, with care. If you want to understand anything, you need to see everything, warts and all. As a species, we found time and again that our cultural biases, our ethnocentric way of thinking that our culture is superior to all others, are simply wrong. Humanity has found many ways to be human. Anthropology studies those many paths. What does humanity see in the great mirror of anthropology? Before answering this question, you need to understand where anthropology came from. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere, and it wasn't invented overnight. It was cobbled together, refined, reinvented, crafted, and then reimagined and reinterpreted, such that today anthropology is a very diverse field, holding up many mirrors for humanity. Instead of giving you the whole history of anthropology, which would take a separate book,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?